President Trump, who's won a pair of lawsuits against the three broadcast networks, is now escalating his battle against two of them. ABC and NBC fake news, two of the worst and most biased networks in history, give me 97% bad stories. If that's the case, they are simply an arm of the Democrat Party and should, according to many, have their licenses revoked by the FCC. I would be totally in favor of that because they are so biased and untruthful, an actual threat to our democracy. Guy, declaring that ABC and NBC should have their licenses removed, that's more than just the usual anti-media rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with his assessment that they are very biased and stack the deck heavily against him on purpose. They can't stand him. Their journalists vote against him and oppose him like Democratic activists in many cases. I also do not like this idea of a president coming out and saying, let's start yanking people's FCC licenses over a political fight. And I sometimes try to just encourage people on the right to say, how would you react if this exact same sort of threat were being leveled by a Democratic president against an outlet that you prefer? And I think if people are honest with themselves, they would say, oh, well, they might say that's different.
Yeah.
Try to clear that out
Yeah.
and ask the question about the principle and the precedent. And I don't think this is a great look. I hope they don't go anywhere close to this direction. He's actually had quite a lot of success battling hostile outlets just through the use of words and arguments, right? In many cases, I think you say, especially the fact that he's been elected again, he's beaten these people multiple times. I don't think you need to make these kinds of threats.
Well, you can't lose your TV license just because the president doesn't like your coverage, although, Lucy, he does control the FCC.
Yeah, he does control the FCC, and the person who's really at the center of this is Brendan Carr, right?
Who I interviewed on this program a couple weeks ago.
Who's at the helm of the FCC and actually is unlike some members of the Trump crew, is much more in the mold of a traditional free market conservative. And part of Carr's mandate at the FCC was to go in and cut red tape. And actually, in a lot of ways, that is kind of what Carr has set out to do, right? Like make it easier make it more flexible, right? But it doesn't really matter whether or not Carr's actions end up lining up with the president's words. And his words also, I mean, his threats and his words, they do the job themselves. And you can see that in a lot of things. You can see that in how large corporate actors, the Paramount deal, you could see that in what happened with the George Stephanopoulos lawsuit, right, with ABC, the threats to 60 Minutes. So we are often told, oh, well, we should just, well, Trump says maybe I'll be a dictator, maybe I won't, whatever. But it is really very serious to have the president making these kinds of statements at all. Like many people are saying, we should do away with their licenses. These words alone, it doesn't matter if he follows up on them. The words alone, posts alone like that, are what will silence his critics, and that's very wrong.
But is this serious, or is it what we would call in baseball a brushback pitch?
Could be either, right? I think some brushback pitches are valid and necessary. You gave a couple examples. We saw some of the internal memos. New York Times reported about this at CBS, that they were very worried about what discovery might provide to President Trump and his team based on some of the internal documents and discussions within that network.
Which is why CBS Paramount decided to settle
exactly.
rather than
And Stephanopoulos used a very specific word on broadcast television. You know, there are also limits on when it comes to truth and that sort of thing. You get a broad spectrum. You get a lot of wide berth in the media, as you should, under the First Amendment. But, Trump's gone after them that way. I would just say, in terms of a media strategy, if you want to highlight, whether it's NBC or ABC or any of the other networks, if you think that they're biased and you think that they're not giving you a fair shake, I think you deploy some of your best people onto those networks to, in some cases, run circles around the journalists conducting interviews. I think Secretary Rubio has been spectacular in some of these interviews. The vice president is also very good at picking apart some of these loaded questions. I would prefer to see a lot more of that, like go into the lion's den and confront them with your best people, as opposed to Truth Social posts like we're talking about.
Well, Trump says ABC and NBC should pay millions in licensing fees. Maybe that's right for use of the airwaves, but then all the networks should, rather than singling out the ones you don't like. So is the real goal here to intimidate TV news operations?
I actually think that is one goal, but that actually may be a secondary goal to the overarching goal that Donald Trump has in everything he does, which is to sow distrust among the public on institutions like legacy media. That's the thing we didn't even talk about, right? Increasingly, these networks are quite marginalized, right? Like independent media voices are very, very powerful and influential. Exactly, right? But it is about sowing distrust of legacy media, sowing distrust of law firms, sowing distrust of universities. That is his end game,
Well,
and I think
I would just say the media have contributed mightily to the distrust.
They've earned
and credibility.
the distrust in many cases.
Through all kinds of mistakes, sensationalism, and blatant bias.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.